To developing news now, police in Louisville, Kentucky say they will enforce a curfew tonight. This after 2 officers were shot last night during protests over the Breonna Taylor grand jury decision. There were reports of garbage can fires, damaged vehicles, and looting, and police made 127 arrests. The protests coming after a grand jury indicted just 1 of 3 officers in connection to the case, but not directly with Breonna's death. And joining us now to talk more about this, Mike Lawlor, Associate Professor of Criminal Justice at the University of New Haven. Professor, thank you for joining us.
Happy to do it, Aaron.
So obviously many people unhappy with the grand jury's decision and are hoping for some type of turnaround here. Is this the final decision, or is there potentially an appeals process here?
Well, technically, there's no appeal of the decision that was announced yesterday. And it's important to keep in mind, this is Kentucky, has a completely different system for dealing with these things than, let's say, Connecticut does. I mean, the head prosecutor for the state is the attorney general. He's elected. The local DAs are elected. So it's a very different system. Plus, we do not even have grand juries. And that's the entity that decided to bring the charges against just the 1 officer. More charges can always be added down the road. And it was also made clear yesterday that the United States Department of Justice is conducting a parallel investigation related to whether or not anyone's civil rights were violated. So that could result in a federal prosecution, and no announcement has been made on the outcome there yet.
Now, some feel the other 2 officers who fired shots should have been indicted as well. What could have led the grand jury to not feel that way?
Well, I mean, if you believe what the Attorney General of Kentucky said yesterday, he made a couple of points. First of all, they are not able to determine which officer fired the shot that killed Breonna Taylor. So that's number one. Whether that's true or not is another issue, but that's what he said. And it seemed to have a lot more to do with conflicting reports, one from the FBI lab, one from the Louisville, Kentucky Police Department, an analytical lab. So in a criminal case, you have to prove a case beyond a reasonable doubt. And what he said yesterday was there was a reasonable doubt about who fired the shot. Now, that puts aside the whole question of whether the entire enterprise was reckless to start with. I mean, if for those who have been following the story, you know, the shooting took place late at night and early morning hours in a multi-unit apartment building where the bullets were flying into the other apartments. And so why the police chose to that time and that method for executing a search warrant remains to be seen. And you could argue that the whole thing was reckless from the start.
All right, Professor Mike Lawlor from the University of New Haven, we appreciate you being with us.
Anytime.